Today we continue on with our Fruit of the Spirit sermon series. Now, throughout our daily lives, we share many moments with other people, okay? And during those interactions, in order for all of us to, connect a little better, especially if it's someone we don't know well, we often implement what we call small talk, right? It's a way of showing a little bit of friendliness. It just gives you an easy surface level type of a topic so you can have a little conversation. Now, I happen to come from a family that has a very particular thread that we're always talking about, and perhaps you can relate as well. Raylene knows what's coming because we talked this. It's the weather. Do we have any weather people that's like your go-to small talk thing? You're always talking about the weather? A few head nods. People don't want to own that they pay attention to the weather. We're in Michigan. If you don't pay at all attention to the weather, how are you going to know what shoes, what coat, what hat to wear? There's a whole list. Okay. Anyway, Raylene and I, we talk weather. But I know clearly, not everybody really cares about the weather at a level that I do. But there is always a trusty backup plan. And that is gas prices. Everybody talks about, unless you're one of those really fancy folks that maybe you've gone all in on electric vehicles, cool for you. But I'm looking around the room, I kind of know what you drive, and I don't know that we have a bunch of electric vehicles represented here. Because it doesn't matter where you're at, or where you live, or who you are, people spend time talking about gas prices. Specifically, we lament the fact that gas prices jump 40 cents in an afternoon, and then they will take a month or more to go down that same 40 cents. You with me? Now, you know this, but I want to refresh our thinking. But a gas tank is simply a container that holds the gas needed to keep your car running along. Pete, do you know that? Just learned something, didn't you? And so you go to the gas station, you fill it up, and then slowly that level, if you've never seen the gas gauge, young people, it slowly goes down as you drive and it's used up. And when it gets close to being empty, or worse yet, you go out to get in your vehicle and your family left it on empty, you hope that the gas hasn't made that huge 40-cent jump that afternoon so you can go and get your tank filled up. Some of us in the room, and you don't have to raise your hand for this one, but I know who you are probably. It's your personality. You're obsessed with the quest to find the cheap gas prices. And you also are obsessed with never letting your tank get below half tank of gas. Okay, yeah, there's a few of us, aren't there? I know. You know who you are, it's okay. We'll get help later, won't we? But I think sometimes we get the idea that our relationship with God is like our vehicle's gas tank. And this is accurate to some extent because we all have those times when we feel a bit spiritually low. We also have those times maybe after an encouraging experience or an inspirational moment where it seems like our tanks have kind of been filled back up. But this way of thinking about our spiritual lives can be quite deceptive because faith is not like a gas tank that constantly needs topping off. And being part of a church is not being connected to your neighborhood Wesco that simply exists to service your Christianity. The original disciples actually made a similar mistake in their thinking. They thought it was possible, and maybe even better, they thought it was necessary to get a top off for their faith tanks. And so today, to kind of flesh that out a little bit more for us, we're going to be in Luke chapter 17. We're going to start with the first 6 verses, and we're going to be reading out of the Message paraphrase. So I would encourage you, even if you have your own Bible with you, you might want to follow along on the screens because Eugene Peterson did a great job with this, but it's a little bit different, and it gives us a fresh perspective. It gives us a fresh ear for this text. So let's read what's going on here. This is Jesus, by the way, that we're going to encounter right away, the He. It says this, Jesus said to his disciples, hard trials and temptations are bound to come, but too bad for whoever brings them on. Better to wear a concrete vest and take a swim with the fishes than give even one of these dear little ones a hard time. Be alert. If you see your friend going wrong, correct him. If he responds, forgive him. Even if it's personal against you and repeated 7 times through the day, and 7 times he says, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Forgive him. The apostles came up and said to the master, give us more faith. But the master said, you don't need more faith. There is no more or less in faith. If you have a bare kernel of faith, say the size of a poppy seed, you could say to the sycamore tree, go jump in the lake, and it would do it. The apostles came up and said to Jesus, give us more faith. The disciples were a lot like us, or probably to say that better, maybe we are a lot like them. They felt that if they could have more faith, they could be better followers. They could be better students. And we think like this too. We often look at our lives and we're not pleased all that much with what we see. Maybe we're going through some hard times and we feel disconnected from God. And we get this sense that we could be doing a lot better. So we say to ourselves things like this: if only I believed more. If I just trusted more strongly, then I could be a better Christian. Then things would certainly work out well. So we say to God the same thing the disciples said to Jesus. We say, give me more faith. Now, before we get into really unpacking some of Jesus' response here, I want us to just go back quickly and get a little background information for this passage. Because when I reread these verses this week, I thought that they almost seemed a bit disconnected. They appeared to be kind of a mashup of some different instructions. But Luke records them in this way, so I think there must be a lot of meaning behind the order in which he lists them out. See, previously in Luke's gospel account, okay, this would be in Luke 16, Jesus had given the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And it's a story that kind of helps teach us that we need to have a sincere compassion for all people. And now as we move into this chapter, we're in chapter 17, Jesus continues to talk about the great responsibility that we have as true disciples, what might be considered our calling as followers of Jesus. So he begins this section of teaching by warning us all about the seriousness of sin. We are indeed being reminded that we are responsible for our actions and for our words. That's something we learn when we're kids, right? That should carry over to when we are adults. It is a very serious thing to be the cause of hardships, of difficulties, not just for our own selves, but that's a legit thing, but for others as well. And so Jesus tells his listeners, be alert. We all need to be on guard, doing the work of what we might call self-examination or introspection. We have to be aware of what's going on inside of us, and we have to ask ourselves that, wow, what is happening in here? How do I line my head and my heart? And then from being attentive to our inner selves, Jesus moves on to present another challenge. You'll see it here again on the screen. He says this: if you see your friend going wrong, correct him. If he responds, forgive him. Even if it's personal against you and repeated 7 times through the day and 7 times he says, I'm sorry, he says, forgive him. Now, this seems to be like we jump topic just a little bit, but it's not off track at all. Here, Jesus reminds us of 2 very important things. First of all, we need to be accountable to each other. No one really likes hearing that one, right? That one kind of sets us all back. Sometimes we get some head nods. Like, right? Because quite frankly, and I'm the same way, I would rather be alone than have to be accountable to one another. Just think about in your home. If you've got other people that you live with in a house, wouldn't it just be easier to go to your room and shut the door than be accountable to the way you've treated one another? It is. It's a pretty natural response. So Jesus reminds us we need to be accountable to each other. Second, the second important thing is we need to be forgiving. Jesus assumes here that we will actually have friends, which is very nice of Jesus. Hopefully you have some friends. And that we will be living in community, and that we are going to have to practice all of these very fun, I'm trying to sell it, very fun relational dynamics, right? That's hard work. And I know that here at First Church specifically, we spend quite a bit of time speaking about the importance of showing grace and mercy to others. And that's because I want to remind you that grace and mercy are hallmarks of Christianity. Grace meaning this: it is giving something that is not deserved. And mercy meaning not giving something that's deserved. You see, here in this very small section of text, Jesus is actually giving some really heavy-hitting teaching, isn't he? There's some challenge here. First, about how we need to be careful to not get tangled up in sin, and then certainly dragging others into that mess. And then he talks about the important work of forgiveness. And now it's as if his disciples truly feel the weight of all of this on their shoulders. And in verse 5, you'll see it again. It says, the apostles came up and said to the master, "Give us more faith." It's as if they are realizing here, we cannot do all of this. We haven't been given enough faith to get us through this. We need something more to help us out. We need something to fill us up. But the master said, you don't need more faith. There is no more or less in faith. If you have a bare kernel of faith, say the size of a poppy seed, you could say to the sycamore tree, go jump in the lake, and it would do it. This could not have been the answer that the disciples were looking for, right? Okay, I mean, don't we even just shoot this a little bit? Well, I like to call it the side eye, and say, come on, man, this is a text. What? And it's relatable in that way, because what we might expect, maybe what the disciples were expecting, is that Jesus would pray with them and ask God, to grant them more faith. That God would grant them more power. But Jesus answers in this what seems like an outrageous way. If we look at the original language, which we won't delve way down this, but it's Greek, and what we actually get is a sense that the disciples actually did have faith at least as small as that poppy seed. So what might be a more helpful reading of this text would be something like this. It would be, you do have faith. And even if it seems super microscopic and small, you can still do these amazing and great things. In other words, you have all the faith needed, followers. You just aren't using it. See, the disciples weren't necessarily asking for the wrong thing. But the emphasis was not correct. They didn't need to increase their faith. They needed to increase their faithfulness. And there is a big difference. You see, faith is a gift from God. God gives us the amount of faith that we need, and it's not running out on us. So in some way, not that I haven't done this, by the way, so this is not like throwing shade at you, but as we ask God to increase the faith we need, give us more faith, it's actually kind of offensive. It's like saying that, hey, it must not have taken the first time, right? Now, I'd make some really probably almost blasphemous jokes about baptism in that way. We should probably dunk a few of us a few extra times. That's a joke, by the way. So that's not a really good theological thing. But we're actually almost asking God, hey, this didn't work. But faithfulness, on the other hand, okay, that's faith. Faithfulness is our response to our faith. It's what we do with our faith. It is obedience to God's call upon our lives. And that part, brothers and sisters, is up to us. See, a good definition of faithfulness is being loyal and obedient to the person we put our trust in. So certainly in a Christian way, this means that when we commit to following Christ, we put our faith in him, and we must be faithful to him alone. To further this, Jesus then leaves the disciples with a short parable to help put things into a better or a right perspective. We'll continue on now. Luke chapter 17, verses 7 through 10. We'll finish our time in the text today. He says this, suppose one of you has a servant who comes in from plowing the field or tending the sheep. Would you take his coat, set the table, and say, sit down and eat? Wouldn't you be more likely to say, prepare dinner, change your clothes, and wait table for me until I finish my coffee, which that's a really good note, then go to the kitchen and have your supper? Does the servant get special thanks for doing what's expected of him? It's the same with you. When you've done everything expected of you, be matter of fact and say, the work is done. What we were told to do, we did. This is a side note. I like how Jesus smacks us around a little bit when we start thinking we're pretty special, right? He has a way of cutting right to the heart. You see, when we are faithful to Jesus and we're faithful to follow him, we are not given that shiny gold Olympic medal. I wish we were. That'd be cool, especially these ones they were just giving out, right? That's pretty sweet. When we do good works, when we love well on behalf of God, it doesn't help pay for our salvation. Faithfulness is merely part of our job description. Faithfulness is expected. A servant is expected to serve the master, and a Christian is expected to serve, to engage in their faith, and to be faithful. And so I want to encourage us all today that when we get the feeling like something's not quite right in our journey with Jesus, it's not that we lack faith. The hard truth is that we lack faithfulness. We lack obedience. This means that if our spiritual tanks are running low, we cannot simply come to church and park ourselves in a seat and say, fill me up. We cannot offload our responsibility of faithfulness onto, say, the worship team up here in the music. Now, I happen to love music, so let me step to the side. I get it. Music is uplifting. But we don't get to offload our job. It can also not be my job. It can't be the job of the pastor, whoever's standing here giving a message. You see, the Holy Spirit dwells within us, and therefore God can work best from within our own hearts, if we will allow it, if we will obey. So as we bring this particular topic here a little bit towards a close, the question we're driving at, as we'll get to an actionable step in just moments, is this, is if we desire to lead a life of true faithfulness, how can we cultivate this particular fruit of the Spirit more intentionally? And here's your big picture, and we'll break it down just a little. It's we need to be big in the little things. Got to take it in little bite-sized chunks. You see, if we learn something key from this text, it's that faithfulness in the little things, even as small as a poppy seed, is a big thing to God. We are to be faithful to the gifts and the opportunities that God gives us. And that is the continuous, day to day, little by little, step by step way we participate in God's will. And this requires a commitment to living out one's faith in all aspects of life. You've heard me talk about the holistic approach to our faith. That's what it's about. It requires our full obedience, no matter where we're at, no matter what time of day. And so I want to leave us just a few examples. We'll move through these quickly of what this might look like for each one of us today. The first one is honesty and integrity. Being truthful in conversations, even when it might be easier to tell, those little white lies. Like there is a little lie, right? For example, maybe that's just like not exaggerating details. That one's hard. Maybe it's not taking credit for something you didn't do. Don't do that. Maybe it's not centering your experience when it's really about other people. It's being honest and having integrity. As we've said a few times around here, and I appreciate it always in Story Sunday format as well, that we're practicing telling the truth all the way to the bottom. We don't have to skirt around it. A second thing that we can do is kindness and service. See, showing kindness in small interactions, such things like a smile or a kind word to someone whom seems a bit down. Being willing to help others in simple ways. These things matter. It could be as simple as holding a door for someone. It could be seeing someone who might be struggling with standing and finding them a chair to sit in. Those are good things. By the way, these are examples that I've seen here, by the way, which I appreciate. Okay, and it could even just being a listening ear for someone who needs to have a real talk. Kindness and service, they matter. A third one, we've only got 2 more to go. Accountable with resources. You see, being accountable with our finances, but not just dollars. How about our time? How about what we're good at, our talents, the things, the skills, the passions we have? This could mean being careful not to be a food waster. Goodness, we talk about that at my house. Maybe you do too. Okay? But it looks like budgeting wisely too, using our funds wisely. It looks like using our time efficiently. And it's doing our best in all tasks, especially when no one is looking over our shoulder. No one's watching. And then the last one, fourth one here, is forgiveness and grace. Now, by the way, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just all for today. But this is a big one, forgiveness and grace. We do this by working to extend forgiveness and wrongs, even the simple ones that we probably face almost on a daily basis, like someone cutting you off in traffic, right? Ugh, that one's frustrating. How about when someone makes a mistake that inconveniences us, causes us a little more work, some irritations? How about being mindful of our words spoken? We avoid scandalous talk, what we might just call gossip type things. And we avoid slander. And instead, we speak with love and we speak with respect. Now, none of these were earth-shattering examples, right? Those are ones we know. Again, if you grew up with someone looking out for you, you were taught this when you were little. These are all things that mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle, someone in a church family would have taught you. And so they seem small, but they collectively, they build a life that reflects our everyday obedience and faithfulness to God. And Jesus said it like this, actually in that previous chapter to our main text, Luke 16:10, he says, "If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones." Meaning that these small acts of faithfulness are actually foundational to greater responsibilities and deeper spiritual growth. I.e., I tell you this is the example. That means if you are looking for purpose and fulfillment in your life, you better get faithful in the little things. Then you can experience that. I want to give Oswald Chambers the last words of the day. He says it like this: if we will do the duty that lies nearest, we shall see him. Let's pray. As always, Lord, we're very thankful for the opportunity to be together, to to wrestle with a text. We're grateful for the work by so many through your Spirit, through your inspiration that have laid these things out for us. We thank you for